Hey there, welcome to the garage. So I'm finally getting around to putting D-rings on my trailer that I've been trying for a while. The heat, the rain, work, just various things have kept me from it. Anyway, finally got to it and learned a little bit today. But here are the 6 things that I've learned or relearned when welding these D-rings on my trailer. So the first thing I did, instead of just jumping out and trying to stick these straight onto the trailer, I decided I've got a piece of 4x4 by 1/4 inch angle iron that I used as it's scrapped, so it kind of practice metal. I grabbed a couple D rings because I've got extra and decided I was going to practice on that first to really kind of understand which rod I need to use in settings and all of that. That turned out to be a really good idea. So the D rings, the hold downs that come with the D rings that I bought, they come with a little bit of a bevel. They need to be cleaned up anyway because they're not perfect, but so I beveled these a little bit extra to make sure I could get the rod down in for a good root pass, which leads me to lesson number 1 that I learned or relearned, which is that proper prep and fitment are really key to getting a good weld. For the first D-ring I did, I just went straight 70-18, a 70-18 root and a 70-18 fill. I was using 1/8 inch 70-18, got it here. That worked okay. I really like 70-18 rod, but I wasn't quite sure if that was the best way to go about it because I wasn't sure about the root. For the second D ring that I practice on, I went with 60-10, and I was using 3/32 60-10 and running at about 120 amps, which I later on kind of discovered probably was a little too hot for that small of a 60-10 rod. 60-10, I was new to it. I'm not sure that it was the best for a root in this case. It didn't seem to want to run really good with my welder. It was having a really hard time keeping the arc lit. It's easy to start the arc, but really challenging to keep it lit. It just kept wanting to go out on me. Which leads me to lesson number 2, in that having a working knowledge of the different welding rods and what they're used for and what they're good for is absolutely critical to making sure you're using the right one in the right application. For the 60-10 overhead, the underneath side of the hold down, I backed the amperage down a little bit to 110, which actually I think was still a little bit too hot for that small rod. And that seemed to work a little better, but overhead welding is still, I mean, that's a challenge, right? Because gravity is just working against you, pulling that bead or pulling that weld pool right out. Overhead welding in the fixed position or a fixed welding position is definitely the hardest part of welding, regardless of the process. Lesson number 3, overhead is definitely the hardest. In order to really dial in the amperages that I was going to use for the 60-10 and 70-18, instead of trying to continue trying to run those overhead, I flipped the workpiece over so that I could run them on top and just make them a little easier, and really just drilled in on a better amperage to try to get these as close as I could. I still think I was a little too hot on the 60-10, but it was better. The whole time I was welding, I was really dealing with the elements out in the sun was changing and it was cloudy and it was sunny, and you're laying on your back and you're looking up, and just welding in that real world environment was definitely a challenge. I kept adjusting my shade on my helmet or on my hood to try to get it to where I could see better, because I was just really having a hard time, as you can tell from the welds. I was having a really hard time seeing what I was doing, which in the shop in a controlled environment is much easier. That leads me to lesson number 4, in that welding in a controlled environment on brand new, clean, perfect metal versus welding out in the real world in weird positions and bad environments and odd sunlight and everything, you're uncomfortable, it's not harder, it is, but it's just completely different. So it's like learning in the lab versus kind of getting out and really doing it. Lesson number 4, real world welding. It's hard to say 3 times fast. Real world welding is way different from welding in the shop in a controlled environment. So I ended up kind of landing on the idea of using the 60-10 for root pass. I still think I should have gone 1/8 instead of 3/32, but using a 60-10 root and then filling that with 70-18 on top, 2 or 3 passes. So that's kind of where I landed. After I got a little bit more comfortable with that, I decided, I might as well just quit practicing and go ahead and try to see if I can get one of these stuck on the trailer and make it work. So I set up everything to start working on the trailer. And the 6010 is really good at tacking. So that I love that because it just restarts super easy. 7018 does not restart. It doesn't like to restart at all. So I was running the 6010 at 90 amps, both top and bottom. The 7018 I ran at 120 amps on the top, and then on the underneath I backed it down to 115. That seemed to work a little bit. So that leads me to lesson number 5. Getting the correct amperage for the environment, the metal, the position, the rod you're using, getting that amperage correct is absolutely critical to getting a good weld. So all in all, I got these done, and I think they'll hold really well. Of course, I added some high tensile strength spray paint to really make sure that they're extra strong. But I think that I learned a lot, and I'm going to practice a little bit more to get the rest of these on. I've got 4 or 5 more that I'm going to put on. But got a little bit of thinking I'm going to do. I may run 6011 instead of 6010. I'm gonna practice with that. My 6011 experience has been pretty bad, but the 6010 wasn't great either. So I'm gonna go. I don't know. I'm gonna experiment a little bit more. That'll be part 2 for this, I guess. But that leads me to lesson number 6, which is you cannot practice enough welding. So speaking of lesson number 6, I got a lot of practicing to do. I'm gonna do that, and I really appreciate you guys watching. I hope this video has been a little bit informative, a little fun, and hope y'all have a great day. See ya.